Yes.
Well, it's just like...
I can't get any detail on it, but I'll take all the information expertise. She's already in touch with our
Thank you.
which are a pretty cool start because they've got there's more policy expertise over there. It's so nice working for an organization as they have the policy stuff. And I was at Port North Dakota, I was thinking that's freaking really long. Every now and again I call the governor's office and go, so we're talking about this the right way, right? And now it's an actual like policy expert. It's like, gosh, you just wrote this article for the Wall Street Journal. What are we?
No one else.
Oh, great, thank you. Yes. Everything's super. Oh, appreciate it. I'll do the camera all day, so I'll send you make sure he's got it. Otherwise, talk to Pat, right? I started out as a jury. The last stuff. I just got back. June of last year. I joined the state Republican Party in North Dakota. So RAS, everything up there. And another mess so this is coming up. I've only been up there. I call it Southern Coast Exiles for 2 years. Yep. Trying to be a little bit, John did some stuff too, I think, when lots of our folks are really under attack across the country, big protests and all that. And that settled down a little bit that way. So it's easier for us to get out, not being protested, there would still be some folks that want to do that. So it's the time, it's a great time to be conservative in Minnesota. And so I think it's No. I said the same thing. We've done for the that's actually how I heard about Of course, you want to go play presidential politics. Let's do my talk.
Fighting privilege.
How are you?
All
right, can you hear me all right? Too loud? Still too loud? Too loud? How are you doing over there, Mr. Soundman? Got it? All right. What we're going to do now, we're trying to tweak our agenda a little bit. We're having kind of the unplanned speakers between 6:45 and 7 o'clock. And we're calling it Patriot Chat, so if in the future or even tonight, if you say, gee, I'd like to speak to the group for at least 1 minute, you can get that opportunity. Tonight we have Marjorie Holton and Andy Apikowski that are signed up to speak for a couple minutes. But before we do that, and so we're gonna do this little Patriot Chat. We're going to do the pledge and the prayer, we're going to do the Patriot Chat, and then we're going to start your meeting around 7 o'clock. So, with that, go ahead and say.
Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I know.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for a second. Heavenly Father, thank you for today. We thank you for your many blessings you have bestowed on us. Lord, guide our discussion tonight such that we learn how to apply what we learn from this meeting. In addition, grant us the courage, the discipline, and the follow-through to act on your guidance. In your name we pray. And so, Margie, ladies first.
Is that your bag?
Nope.
Well, I don't want to.
Go ahead.
I'm part of the Minnesota Child Protection League. Does anybody remember about a year ago we had full-page ads in the paper saying, are you okay with a boy showering with your daughter? Anybody see our ads? Okay, well that was That too.
Yeah.
We'll talk later. Anyway, ever since that time, I'm on the board of Minnesota Child Protection League. We have been fighting, but things are getting worse and worse. And now in many of the schools, if you talk to your children and grandchildren and find out what's going on, they are teaching this genderbread person and Gumby, as in an androgynous type of thing, where the children can be whatever of 50 different genders that they choose to be. We have a seminar coming up on May 9th, it's Saturday. The keynote speaker is Barb Anderson. I don't know if she's here. She sometimes comes to these things. I'm actually one of the speakers talking about Title IX, but we would like to educate you on what is going on, what is being taught in the schools, what our legislature is doing. We did have a bill that was put forth, and it had to be heard before April 1st in order to meet the first deadline, and suddenly they've pulled it, so we're not real happy. I'm not going to be too mean to anybody in the legislature tonight, but we need to put pressure on because a lot of things are going on. And so first, we as the Tea Party Patriots need to be educated, and then we need to be motivated to be activated and so forth. So this is part of the education process. So I'm going to either pass these out or put them on a table or something, but there is an upcoming seminar, and the deadline to sign up for a reduced fee is coming up on this Saturday. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Margaret. Andy. Andy is going to share a few words about, Andy Apicowski is going to share a few words about national delegates. Hi there, everyone. Nice to see you again. I'm running for a different office. First off, I just want to thank all of you who did come and help me in the special election. I know a lot of you came and actually volunteered or donated, helped with my campaign. We didn't make it over the top. We had a bunch of Democrats come over and help the Republicans beat me in the primary, but I'm running for the RNC delegate. Who here lives in CD6? Any of you delegates to the convention? Yeah. Okay, so at the CD6 convention, we're electing 3 people to go to the national convention and actually be part of the Cleveland chaos that's going to actually select our nominee. I'm running as a Ted Cruz supporter. I'm running that if there is no one with 1,237 pledged delegates going into Cleveland, we have an open convention. I want to support the process, and I'm going to support Ted Cruz.
All right.
So I've actually got a little lit piece here. One of the things I've noticed as I'm going around to speak to people, there's no Ted Cruz litmus stick. So I actually put something together, and a letter from me on the front, piece of Ted Cruz on the back. I've got some on the table. Take a look at it. Learn about Ted, see what you can do to help Ted Cruz. For those of you out there that have been paying attention, we've got 2 guys in the race. I can tell you personally from my door knocking in the dead of winter in Minnesota, Donald Trump is going to be an anchor on Republicans at the ballot. And I know he's saying some things that people like, but as you're out there talking to voters, it's the legislative candidates, the local candidates are the ones who explain that soundbite, that context, the context behind that clip you hear on news. So I think it's really important we have a candidate that's a solid conservative that we can trust to be on the ballot to represent us at the national level. The biggest thing about it is, the reason I'm supporting Ted Cruz is a constitutional conservative. He's not one of the establishment guys in Washington. He's not an insider. He's not a go-along-to-get-along guy. In my own Senate race, we had the establishment come out against me in the primary. The establishment doesn't want Ted Cruz either. That's why I think we need to support him. He's the only guy that can go there, stand up, and has actually stood up against the establishment, not donate to them like Donald Trump has. So, those of you in CD6, I'd love to have your vote on April 23rd. Thank you. Okay, maybe this will be better. All right, we also have one more person to speak during this little Patriot Chat time. Scott Court's going to give us a few highlights on the results of the SD 35 convention that was held last Saturday.
Hello, everyone. My name is Scott Court. I am the SD 35 EPOU treasurer. My role is multifaceted, but primarily in the terms of the way the caucus works and the way the convention worked. I'm the data guy. So Ben's passing out a piece of paper. Take a look at this if you're interested in. This happens to be a breakdown of how all of the precincts fared as far as the caucus attendance. And some of it was actually pretty interesting. So the front page has the specific voting for all of the various candidates in the straw poll, or whatever it's worth. But the back page is where I find the most interesting data. It talks about, in particular, how many people showed up. So if you look at the columns, there's one column that says voted. Voted is the number of people who voted for in the caucuses. Old is everyone who was signed up to be doing work in the state's data tables, the PCRC forms, if you're familiar with the lingo. Those are people who have been at a precinct, or I'm sorry, at a caucus for the last 2 cycles. No shows are just that. Return are the number of people in the PCRC books that came back this time around. New is just that, the number of new people that have not participated or were not in the last 3 cycles. So if you look at the percentage of return, some of that was kind of interesting. If you look at the ratio of the new people to old people, it's pretty clear that there was a lot of people very interested in at least attending the caucus, maybe to understand what was going on. And one of the things that we found was there was a large number of people that thought the only reason they were coming to the caucus was to vote in the straw poll. But we still ended up with quite a few new delegates, new Senate district delegates out of the whole thing. And our last few meetings have been, we've had at least half again as many people as we normally do. So caucuses in general turned out pretty well. Last Saturday we had our nominating convention. We did nominate candidates for Senate and for both of the House districts. We had 263 delegates that we were allowed. We elected 255 out of those, and 104 alternates. Out of those 255 delegates that we elected, 270 people showed up as either delegates or alternates to the convention, and we ended up seating 233 of those. So we actually did reasonably well. We were allowed 34 delegates to the state and the congressional district convention. In CD6 and 5. In CD3, we have one little piece of our Senate district with CD3, commissioners for CD6. So of the 34, we got 34 state delegates, 34 CD delegates, and 55 alternates. You're allowed to double the number. We got 34 state delegates and 35 alternates. And in CD3, we got 5 delegates and 5 alternates for both CD and state. So we actually did reasonably well. We covered all of our bases. So just some statistics.
Thanks, Scott. Our next speaker is going to be Joe Torelli. He's going to talk about the Convention of States. He's got some flyers he's going to share with us and give a few thoughts on what he's working on.
Hi, my name is Joe Torelli. I'm visiting from the Southwest Metro Tea Party. I am in SD33. We just had our BPOU convention on Tuesday night, nominating our 2 representatives, Hertos and Hugh, and Dave Osman. One of the things that I wanted to try to influence is the Article 5 Convention of States, which is, if you haven't heard about it, because I'm finding a lot of people still haven't heard about it, James Madison and George Mason came up with a way of amending the Constitution other than the power of Washington bureaucrats doing it effectively before there was a Washington, D.C., obviously. And it's a way to have the state legislatures, the House and the Senate, of 34 of the states. They didn't say 34 then because they didn't know that's how many there would be. but we need 2/3 of the states to request the convention for proposing amendments. And Jerry Hertoth and Cindy Pugh both have been part of the national movement and have gone to national conferences and conventions to discuss this and how we can make this happen within our states. So right now there's about 29 state legislatures. One house of each legislature has passed it. We need 34 House and Senate to do that. And the only thing that Washington does, Washington has to identify a location and a date for that meeting, and then Washington is completely cut out of the whole mix. And so the purpose is to generate amendment suggestions that are all unified across that particular convention for proposing amendments, and then it goes to the state legislatures, and if 38 of those state legislatures pass it, it's an amendment to the Constitution. Dwight Eisenhower supported it. Many others have supported it over the years, and we're working to try to make that happen now. We have, there's a national organization called Convention of States Action, and I'm the district captain for the southern part, kind of on Deep Haven, Wayzata, that whole area. And I've got some flyers that are on the table out there. Come and see me. I'll be here for your meeting tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Good stuff. So many people being working hard on so many different things. We have one more speaker. I keep saying one more. One more. And Senator Mary Kiffmeyer is here, and she's just like a minute down on the agenda, but she has personal privilege anytime she wants to stop by.
So good to be here. I needed this fresh air. Oh my gosh, I've been at the Capitol for about 5 weeks now, and so I had to come stop by a Tea Party group and get me a good dose of reality before I go back again tomorrow. So on that Convention of States, by the way, I'm working on a bill for that resolution and so on. And it is important, and I thought the most powerful thing is realizing it is the states who created the federal government. The federal government did not create the states. So it is the states who got together, who put together our constitutions and the 3 separate branches. And so I think it's going to be up to the states to hold the feds accountable and help rein in their out of control issues that they have there. The other thing is that I thought it was really neat when I read that Ted Cruz supports a convention of states to rein in the federal government. So I think when it gets to that level, it's encouraging. And Ralph and I went to a conference, and we were able to hear a little bit more about the Convention of States. And so I met with a group that is actually talking about the rules that would be governing part of that process, which is very, very important. So no matter which way you come at it, I don't know what else is going to rein in the federal government other than, number one, a president. But even that president goes, another one can come in. There needs to be something a little bit more long-term that we can fix it with. By the way, I saw Phil Krinke when I came in here. And Phil, I don't want to miss an opportunity to commend you, though. When I was Secretary of State, the one person that I could count on who understood was Phil. And it was great when you're in that position to be able to have somebody that you knew you could trust. And that's not an easy thing to say when you're talking about the legislature, but I've always felt that it was important to make sure that when I'm working with other people that come before me, that I speak straight and truthfully to them. But I've also learned you can be tactful while you do that too. It doesn't hurt. So thank you for your doing. We got a great year coming up. It's going to take all the boots on the ground, every effort. I think we're not asking for your life, your honor, and your fortune like the founders of our country did. A little bit of your time, a little bit of your money, a little bit of your talent is very, very welcome, and we need it greatly this year. So thank you for being involved.
Thank you, Senator. I've been starting a lot of conversations with my children, grandchildren, not so much grandchildren, but a little bit, with anybody I know, to just start this sentence, and doesn't matter where you're going with it. Do you think that when the states created the federal government, and then you just kind of go from there, do you think that they thought this would be a good idea? Do you think that would be a good idea? And just help make it it's almost conversational. And because there's a lot of people, of course, as we all know, that don't understand that the states delegated some very specific duties to the federal government. At any rate, I think that's good stuff. And we're on to our regular program now. What does that say? We return to our regular program. First of all, I'd like to welcome some guests, and boy, we have a lot of them. So, let's see. I see the Mayor Coon Rapper. He probably is a Koch brother, I think. You know,
A different group of Koch brothers.
different group of Koch brothers. I see Representative Mark Rubel. And I see.
Representative Whalen is here.
Representative Whalen is in the back somewhere. All right. We have. I saw Bruce Miller earlier, but he's probably getting a beer. He's like that. Let's see. And of course, Phil Prinky, former representative down the shore of you area, I believe. And let's see. Anybody else? Did I miss somebody? I missed you. That's right. All right. Well, thank you for coming. One of the things we're really trying to do here, and we just think it's important. We're not going to agree with our legislators and our elected officials all the time, but we want to make sure that we have a dialogue with them. And so you know, as our code of conduct is, be civil. You can disagree, but don't be disagreeable. And always defend the Constitution. I think you can never go wrong defending the Constitution. So we're going to let me work through this a little bit. You probably are aware, it's on those sheets that I handed out, there are many of the tables, but our vision again, we envision a nation where personal freedom is cherished and where all Americans are treated equally, assuring our ability to pursue the American dream. Our mission, secure public policy consistent with our core principles. Our core principles, personal freedom. Live how you want while not infringing on other people's rights. Economic freedom. Grow jobs and your opportunities. Lower taxes and less government spending. And debt-free future. For you and generations to come, we should pay our own debt. Some upcoming meetings we're going to have. I think we're going to have a meeting on Cuba. I think it'll be very interesting. We're working on the details of that. We're also working on a meeting focused on the Met Council. That'll be upcoming. Watch for information on that. And since this is about legislative priorities, I just thought I would share what we think some of the legislative priorities are based on our principles and what we think ought to be done. And for one thing, we think that this session ought to stop Southwest Light Rail. That's it'll be hard to do that. There'll be federal money that people are trying to hang over their heads. But, if we don't stop it here, we're going to have little choo-choo trains floating all around the metro area. No tax increases. We think that the House had a pretty good transportation plan last year. We'd like to see some version of that come back to surface. Educational choice. One of the things that we talk about, in fact, it's under the current of everything that we talk about when we say people don't understand that states created the federal government. And the education system that we have doesn't focus on that. The founders, they focus all on the flaws of the founders, and we all have flaws, and so did they. But they really created a great constitution for us to live by. And I think we need to get education. We need to get control education back in the hands of parents as a core part of fixing that overall problem. We think eliminating inshore is just common sense, and I guess more common sense. We think any laws that get passed out of respect to gender at birth. So that seems, these would not be very controversial 40 years ago. And then on constitutional priorities, and this is maybe my personal push, I don't believe people can say no unless they're forced to say no. And I think we need a constitutional spending cap. More important even than a balanced budget, we should have a constitutional spending cap. Because without a cap, there's no stop to how much the government encroaches.
So that's what we're about, and now let's move on to the meeting. And our first, we have an update from the National Tea Party that Donna Thibodeau is going to share with us. And then we have a short update from Andrew Richter, who's going to talk about the pretty convoluted process that the Met Council went through in presenting choices to the Crystal City Council. And then we're going to have Americans for Prosperity. Jason Flores is going to tell us a little bit about what that organization is doing. What am I doing? I can't tell high sign. We already did the pledge. We did the pledge and the prayer before we did the patriot check. And if there is any other legislators that want to speak for a minute or invited candidates, we give them a minute. And then we're going to have our main speaker, Speaker Kurt Daudt, is going to talk about the status of things and the legislative priorities for this coming year, which is, we're all looking forward to that. Unfortunately, Assistant Minority Leader Michelle Benson will not be able to be here tonight. She's got a committee meeting that just is not going to be able to get over in time. So we're going to lean on Speaker Daudt to carry the day. And then I'll wrap it up at the end. And so with that, let me start with Donna Thibodeau giving us a little update on what's going on at the National Tea Party level.
No. Can you hear me now?
A little better.
Okay. Well, the National Tea Party update is what's going on in Washington, D.C. with our affiliated organization, National Tea Party. The House and Senate were not in session last week, so really nothing is going on there to report on yet. What are you guys doing Monday, April 18th? If you've got the money, Tea Party Patriots is having a rally in front of the U.S. Supreme Court because they are holding a hearing on the DACA bill, also known as the Dreamers Bill, and we are trying to slow down or stop that. And after that, then they're going to go across the street and talk to our legislators about holding that one back a ways. Then another meeting is coming up, or another event, Wednesday, May 11th, the National Tea Party Patriots is sponsoring rallies, local rallies all over the United States at noon local time. And this one is to stop the nomination of Merrick Garland to the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, I realize all of us are not in agreement on that. Some people want that to go forward, but the Tea Party Patriots has taken a stand that says, you know, we should let the people speak in the next election and then let the next president, hopefully a Republican, nominate the next person. So anyway, and it seems like, you know, if all things were equal, that it would be great to go ahead and appoint a new Supreme Court, but they're not. We seem to send Republicans to Washington who have weak knees. And, you know, I think we ought to issue each new representative and senator a cane with the Constitution wrapped around it to help them stand strong. Now, the other thing, and the last thing I want to really talk about is the delegate count. The race is on for delegates at the National Convention. That's what Andy wants to be, is a delegate. And there was something that was on, I can't remember whether it was on last night, either Kelly File or Hannity, about, they showed a video clip of some guy, I guess he's an informal advisor to Trump. And he threatened and bullied and said, if our delegates decide to abandon us on the second or third vote, we will give out their names, their hotel addresses, and their room numbers, and we will pay them a visit. Now that's over the top, that's threatening and bullying and should be stopped. And I just think that is absolutely despicable. If I were a national delegate, I guess I would think twice about exercising my free choice of who I was going to vote for. So that was just terrible. But the Trump campaign should denounce that very loudly, and so far I have not heard one word of that. But when you look at the bigger issue, is that the kind of president that we want? Someone who's going to threaten and bully and say, you stole my votes and all kinds of stuff? I don't know. That's up to you. And that the last thing is, I have a table over there I call Donna's Corner. My job is education. I have some free handouts. I have some booklets that's $1 and other books that are marked as. And stop over there, and if nothing else, pick up the free stuff. I also have one article on there on the, it's an editorial in the Union Herald about should we go to a primary system. And I'm vice chair of ANOCA P3, and I personally had to turn away 3 people because they came after the vote was done and counted, and that's sad. That is really sad. So we need to do, in my opinion, something to change that. And that's it.
Thanks, Don. Okay, next on the list, Andrew Richter is going to come up and talk about something, talk about bullying. The Met Council certainly, isn't there a bullying law? Maybe they could be prosecuted for being bullied or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, Andrew's going to tell us a little bit about the choice, the kind of the false choice that the city of Crystal was given relative to light rail. So, Andrew?
Yeah.
Thank you, Ben. I hate being the bearer of bad news. Nobody hates being that more than me. Unfortunately, I am this evening. As some of you know, we've done a lot of work in Crystal to flip their council, and we got rid of every single person on that council in the 3-cycle elections, and we have a 6-to-1 majority in the Keith Ellison district there in Crystal. And one of the things I was excited to stop was Botno light rail, because I knew local consent was coming early in 2016. Well, I found out we don't exactly get to vote on what's called local consent. The legislature and the Met Council and the legislature's given away some of their lawmaking authority to this unelected body, has gamed the system to where your choices, just let me back up a minute, we're in the design phase of Botno. Now what that means is it's already assumed that it's going to go through, even though they have no state funding, no federal funding, they haven't begged for China's money yet or anything with the federal government. But we're asked at the design phase, when it's 15% design, to give what's called local consent to the design phase of the project. We weren't being asked whether we want the project. The choices that all the city councils were faced with was vote yes, do nothing, which is the equivalent of a yes vote, or vote no and tell the Met Council what it would take to vote yes. Those are the 3 options you're faced with, and that is in Minnesota state statute. So we had a dilemma, and we decided, the council decided, I should say we, some council people wanted to be here, they're at a work session, okay, so I feel like I'm speaking for them. They decided to take no action and passed a resolution basically stating that they don't support the project. About a week later, the Met Council put out a bulletin basically stating that every single city loves it. They all passed a resolution supporting it. Even people like Sue Jeffers picked up the story, and I love Sue, but she was wrong in what she posted, that all of the cities consented. The Met Council lied about our vote. The only people who reported it correctly were us on our blog. Even the local papers didn't report it right. So the chair of the Met Council got to go out. And now the whole purpose of this is so they can go to the state and say, oh, everybody wants it, everybody loves it. Well, we're not given a choice to vote no. And the same thing happens on what's called the LPA process, local preferred alternative. Crystal went through this a few years ago. I didn't know that we didn't have a choice. But basically, what the councils were voting on was we had 3 alternatives to where the light rail was going to go. You couldn't vote no. You could only vote for one of the alternatives or take no action. So it's, ultimately it's a lose-lose all around. And we're really stymied on how we can stop it at this point. Outside of the legislature not appropriating funds, I'm not sure that it can be stopped. Yes.
Couldn't you have withheld local consent until certain architectural features or program features were met? For example, you could have said, I withhold my local consent until you include the following separated grade crossings at the following locations. And while you're not allowed to necessarily vote no, you are allowed to insert project features into it, and that alone delays it out, and until that they get to that point, they do not have your local consent.
Well,
Is that
actually,
accurate?
the way it was explained by the Met Council guy, all we can do is request. We have 45 days to act, or we are considered a yes vote. So it isn't, we couldn't make demands saying, we tried.
They say I'm not going to give local consent until my separating grade
Well,
crossings.
you can do that.
Yeah.
If you don't act in 45 days, it's considered a yes vote.
Well, do it in 44 days.
Yeah, well, we did it in 43. We tried, but I don't know that, that strategy was talked about, and we basically have to accept their promises at a 15% design phase. That's all they're required by state law to present is 15% of the design phase. So,
Mark Hugel, I'm in the State House, and I also am on the Transportation Committee. I represent Champlin, part of Coon Rapids. The Met Council will do anything, and I mean anything, to promote their light rail agenda. And Chair Dunnick in my office just yesterday, we were talking about a different issue. But you mentioned the bonds that the Met Council needs from the state of Minnesota, from the Minnesota State Legislature. Well, obviously, our caucus, which controls the House, will never vote for that. So now what they want to do is go around us. And there is some precedent for this, where they would issue essentially junk bonds under their own authority to finance the rest of the Southwest. And we're looking at some legal opinions on this, but it's a real serious problem. If you think for 1 minute that you can influence, even as a legislator, their agenda over there, it's absolutely impossible. They are on a mission, and they will run over anybody that they can to get Southwest done, and they're going to try and bypass the legislature. If the speaker shows up tonight, I'm sure he can tell you a lot more than I can, but I'm very discouraged about that. And we do have a bill in also with regard to light rail for fare box recovery. And what does that mean? Every light rail ticket that's sold only gets about 30% of the real cost. The rest of it you're subsidizing. The taxpayers are subsidizing 70% or somewhere around that of every light rail pass that's sold. So we have major problems. We're working on it. But remember, we only have one leg of the stool. We have the governor and we have the Senate. And Senator Kipmeyer is here. And without total control, there's very little we're going to be able to do. Thank you.
Okay.
One more thing, and then I'll let this go. I covered some of those city council meetings on light rail in the Southwest. In Edina, for example, the public came in 10 to 1 to speak against it. So the public came in and spoke 10 to 1 against light rail. The city council told the public that whether they voted yes or no would have no difference because this was only the consent for the architect. When in fact, they were running up against a hard deadline for federal funds. and they lied to everyone in the room and said, it won't make any difference. If we vote no, we'll get light rail anyway. When in fact, if they had voted no, the whole thing has to go back for review. They would have missed, I think, their October 15th deadline, and the line would have died. But every city council lied to everybody in those rooms.
Wow. Someone should talk to the Star Tribune, I suppose.
Yeah.
In our case, the line wouldn't have died. It was clear that we could have voted no, and that in some ways takes you back to the drawing board, in some ways it doesn't. You actually don't get another vote on the design phase. It just keeps pressing forward regardless. So a no vote, we could have presented our case again, but again, they're under no obligation to give us what we asked for.
Southwest, they were
on
a hard deadline.
Oh, okay. Well, we're not in Bottom.
Okay, so we'll probably come back to light rail later in the program. Let's and I'm pretty strong against light rail, so I'll make sure it comes up again. But what we want to do, though, is we want to move on a little bit. And we have Jason Flowers, is that pronounced correctly? Flores, Jason Flores. And I liked him right away. He grew up on a dairy farm. So, you know, that gives him a lot of credibility right out of the gate, you know. Anybody knows how to work 7 days a week, morning and night. Got to work your cards and drinking it in between. Anyway, so we're very proud to have Jason here to speak for the Americans for Prosperity, talk about some of the things that they're doing to help us win the hearts and minds, and also do a little help with our legislators as well. So, Jason.
Thank you so much. Give me just a second here. We're going to try to get this queued up. I've got some pretty pictures, which is really what I want to be able to share with you tonight. There we go. Okay. My name is Jason Flores. I'm the State Director for Americans for Prosperity here in the state. How many of you have heard of Americans for Prosperity? Heard of it. Awesome. I'm absolutely in the right room then. Sometimes I have to go through this whole rigmarole and identify where we're at on the spectrum. Well, we are all in good company tonight. We talked a lot about politics tonight, talked a lot about candidates tonight. I'm here tonight to talk about issues, because that's what we focus on. Hit the wrong button. We focus on issues because those principles that we all stand on, of limited government, fiscal responsibility, of holding up the Constitution, of keeping government out of people's lives, those are principles that regardless of which party's in power, regardless of which candidate's running, regardless of who's running for what, an endorsement or anything else, those are issues that need work done on. So basically what we do is we go straight to the issues. We take a campaign-style mentality, we take campaign-style tools, door-to-door, phones, direct mail, radio ads, all of those things, but we work on issues and we work on accountability. So whereas some folks would send out an ad that says, Representative so-and-so deserves your vote, we're going to say Representative so-and-so voted against a gas tax increase, and that was good for Minnesota. Or more often than not, it's the opposite. So let me walk through a little bit of what we're doing, and then I'm going to come back at the end to, the bottom line is, we need your help. Because this country, as you've heard about a lot tonight, and this state, are not going in the right direction. And we can sit here tonight and hear some updates and go to some meetings and take some action, and we can work with the right candidates. But if we're not working together on issues, and we're not building a conservative majority on those issues within our communities and reaching out to folks that maybe aren't paying attention or maybe turned off by partisan politics, then we're not doing our job to move those issues forward. So what do? We recruit, educate, and mobilize citizens in support of policies and goals of a free society. Everything that we do is centered around free markets and on limited government as defined in the Constitution. How do we do it? Like I said, it's a campaign-style mentality. We have absolutely the best tools in the game for reaching people on the phone, for reaching people at the doors, mail, radio, the policy research that we do, second to none. We have 34 chapters across the nation, 2.5 now million activists who are involved with AFP across the country in spreading this conservative message out, taking it direct to legislators, taking it direct to their friends and neighbors. Why do we work on free markets? Because the promises that the left makes don't work. We all know this in this room, but we have to spread it out because it sounds good. You can feel the burn as much as you want, right? But it doesn't work. Eventually, problem with socialism, you run out of people who are going to pay for it. We've already reached that point in this country with an $18 trillion of debt. We need to shift it back around. I know not everybody can read this, but this is what the left promises, that the American economy and American workers are better off than when the president took office. That you can get health insurance, everybody will have low rates, better quality care, better access. And of course, the most famous of them all, we pass Obamacare, you can keep your doctor, right? And your insurance plan. What do they actually deliver though? Bottom 20% of income earners right now make less than $20,000. Unemployment in that demographic is worse than it was during the Great Depression. The policies of the left do not work. They do not work for the exact people that they are trying to help. Just had a conversation with this last night. Governor Dayton, his new Senate committee or joint committee on disparities. They're going to throw a bunch of money at a couple communities and call it work. We have spent since 1964 in the war on poverty as a nation $15 trillion on programs that the left has pushed out. 1964, there were 15% of the population living in poverty. You know how many people are living in poverty now after that $15 trillion? 14.7. So $15 trillion bought us 0.3% of the people we were trying to help. They're now doing a little bit better. It's absolutely failed. We can do better. And the worst part, you read one thing, it's the top line. We can't trust the American people to make those types of choices. That is absolutely wrong. The only people we can trust to make choices are the American people, not politicians, especially those that talk about the things we're talking about tonight. So why the free market? Capitalism, free markets, access to the ability to earn your own way has lifted more people out of poverty nationwide and in this country's history than any other form ever has. If a rock star like Bono can get it, anybody can understand it. Since 1970, percentage of people globally living on $1 a day less has fallen by 80%. That's not because of socialism. That's not because of dictators. That's not because of government programs or the UN or foreign aid. That's because of free markets. The exact things that politicians on the left are trying to stop here in this country. So we fight for people. We fight for issues. We don't support a party, we don't support candidates, but we make sure that the conservative issues that you all believe in get pushed here and in Washington. This really sums it up. I don't know if you can see it. The left's idea is that we're going to pass down more food, right? You're down in a hole, well, I'm just going to give you food and water, but you're going to stay in the hole. The conservative side would say, no, let's build a ladder. Let's get you out of the hole. And then you come up here and enjoy the life that you choose. So our 2016 focus areas really come into play in taxes and spending, energy, and healthcare. Let me give you an example of what we do, and then I'll wrap up. You've heard a little bit about tonight about the transportation bill that's pending at the state legislature. And there's a big impasse over whether or not we put in place more taxes or whether or not we use existing revenues to pay for it. Now, I'd argue, I think the speaker will argue, that we need to use existing revenues to pay for it. We're only spending 40% more as a state than we were 6 years ago. How many of your lives are 40% better because of government tonight? Okay, that's all you need to know. We don't need more tax revenue. We certainly don't need more gas tax revenue, because that hits lowest income folks the most as a percentage of their income. It's a regressive tax. So what do? Americans for Prosperity, we take action on that. Over the last couple of weeks, we've made thousands of phone calls to Senate offices to hold accountable those senators that voted for a gas tax increase last time around. We have volunteers just like you in our offices in Burnsville and in other places that we do remote phone banks at, making phone calls into someone's district. We get a person on the phone that also believes that those gas taxes should be put into place. We'll directly connect them with their senator's office. They can leave a message. So we have a few of our friends in the Senate that voted for that gas tax increase that have gotten dozens of calls from constituents, unscripted, at their Senate offices saying, do not raise my gas taxes. That's just one issue, one set of things that we've taken on so far. obviously working on energy issues, things that raise the energy rates. Governor Dayton's implementing the Clean Power Plan, even though the Supreme Court told him not to. I think we can probably agree that at least hold off on that until the Supreme Court allows you to do that. Those are the issues we're working on. I promise you I'll come back. We need your help. We have these tools. We have these data, similar tools to what other groups in the state are using. But we need people to help us do that. Whether at our office in Burnsville, up here at a remote bank or a volunteer event, in your district, in your community, we can find a way to give you the tools to connect directly with your friends and neighbors and help us spread this kind of message. So, organizers here tonight know how to get a hold of me. Contact information is on there. Our website is americansforprosperity.org. If you just search for Americans for Prosperity, you'll be able to find it. If you're on Twitter, follow @ProsperityMN. That's where we put most of our information about what's going on day to day. Please get involved. Coming to meetings, connecting with fellow like-minded conservatives, preaching to the choir, that's one thing. Taking the battle out to the streets, finding more people and bringing them into our conservative movement is what we really need to do. So we'd appreciate your help, and I'll do anything I can to help give you what you need to make that happen. So thanks for inviting me to speak tonight. Have a good evening.
Wow, that was great. That could almost take up a whole meeting for that kind of information. Right now, it's my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker of the night. We have one of my fellow SD31 people, SD31A representative, who has been in the House a very short while and has risen to the ranks of Speaker. And the last session did just an amazingly well job, I thought. He was up against a couple grizzly old DFLers, and Speaker really held his own. Usually Michelle Benson, my senator from 31, accompanies the Speaker and talks about the House side. Senator Benson got hung up tonight in a committee meeting. We knew that was always a risk. I've asked Senator Kiffmeyer from SD30 if she would kind of fill in a little bit, not to put her on the spot, but she's fresh off the farm, so to speak, from being in the Senate today. So I'm going to turn this over to Speaker Kurt Daudt, and he's going to give you an update, and we're going to have a long Q&A time. So.
Thank you all very much for inviting me to join. Thank you, Larry, for the kind introduction. It's really nice to get the heck out of St. Paul. So it's nice to be amongst some friends and see some friendly faces. Larry told me that I had an hour, so in an odd twist of fate, I didn't realize this when I took the job, but the Speaker of the House, the title is Speaker. I'm the only one that's not allowed to speak on the House floor. So I take advantage of things like this where I get to talk for, I won't talk for an hour, I'll talk for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions, because I want to talk about what you want to talk about, and then Senator Kiffmeyer can join me as well if you have questions as it relates to Senate stuff. So she's going to pinch hit for Michelle Benson, who was supposed to be here, I guess, and Michelle is my senator, but got the opportunity to work with Senator Kiffmeyer in the House when I was first elected, and now she went, I can't say, she went to the upper body, and now she serves in the Senate, so that's a little running joke at the Capitol. But anyways, she's great, and it's fun to serve with her. I have a couple of members here, I think, and I'm going to recognize them really quickly. Mark Uglum, from this area, right? Is this your district?
Champlin and Coon Rapids, yes, sir.
And then Abigail Whalen from the Anoka area. Is that it? I don't want to miss anybody. So they're doing a great job. So we are in session. Are we 4 weeks in right now? 5 weeks in right now? So every week that passes, we're 10% done with session. 10-week session is as short as we've had in recent memory, which is really a great thing. And it's, I always say the good news is every week that passes, the good news is we're 5 weeks done with session. The bad news is we still have 5 weeks to go. So what we need to do is get our work done and get the heck out of there. This session, and maybe I'll try to set the table a little bit for kind of where we're at, how we got here. And I can't really do that without talking about the surplus and what has happened kind of in recent memory. So the most recent revenue forecast came out in February, February 26th, and it told us that we have $900 million of surplus revenue projected. We don't have the money yet, but it's projected to come in during the course of this, the rest of this biennium. Okay, that's about $900 million for the second half of the 2-year biennium. Okay, we're about at the same point we were at the beginning of the biennium when we had $1.8 billion for the entire 2-year period, right? Because we're about halfway through, or almost. The roller coaster that we've been on over the course of the last couple of years, a year ago in the February forecast, we had a $1.8 billion projected surplus. At the end of session, we left about $1 billion unspent on the bottom line, okay? That was in the end of May of a year ago. In June, we went back into special session. We had to negotiate with the governor a little bit. We ended up spending a little more on K-12 education. That left us with about $875 million left on the bottom line unspent. I can't tell you how difficult it is to work with Democrats and actually, if you knew the battle that I had to go through to leave money unspent on the bottom line. And I'll tell you what, our goal going into session last year, number one was tax relief. We wanted to give as much money back to taxpayers as we could. And number two, we wanted to do a small transportation funding package. One of our constitutionally defined core functions of state government is to fund our road and bridge infrastructure. So to take some of that money, transfer it out, take the revenue from, in our plan, 3 sources. Sales tax on auto parts, rental cars, and leased vehicles, and move that from the general fund into the road and bridge fund, which would have a couple of impacts. Number one, it would fund our roads and bridges. But number two, it would start to starve out the general fund. So it would remove revenue that's currently going into the general fund, which is a really good thing. At the end of session, in negotiations, Senator, if you remember, the governor had proposed raising the gas tax, and not just increasing the gas tax, but the largest gas tax increase in state history. Okay, about 16.5 cents a gallon. That could have gone up as high as, if gas went to $4 a gallon, could have gone as high as 26, 28 cents a gallon. Okay, that's on top of what we already pay, and we're one of the highest right now. We got into a standoff, and the first thing that I'm going to say is, as long as I'm Speaker of the House, the gas tax is absolutely dead. Period. Yeah. So we got into a standoff, and I remember being in the residence with the governor and Senator Bach, and we were sitting at kind of a long table in the residence, and the governor on one side and Senator Bach on the other. If you know Senator Bach, you'll kind of understand this story. He's kind of a bigger-than-life, not only personality, but just physically kind of a big guy. And he puffed up his chest, and he was pointing at the table, and he said, if you're not willing to raise the gas tax, we're not going to do a tax bill, and we're not going to do a transportation bill. And I had to make a decision, which I think, it was a bit of a gamble at the time. But knowing that if you're not willing to walk away, you don't have any power. So I called his bluff, and I said, fine, we won't do it. We'll do them next year, but I'm not going to let you spend the money. And I didn't. We left that money unspent in the bottom line. So from the end of session, June of last year, to right now, we have about the same amount of resources that we had available. Now, there was a bit of a roller coaster in there that I alluded to. From June of last year, we had $875 million sitting unspent. That went up to $1.8 billion in the November forecast. Now, that actually, it was from February to November. And most of that revenue came in while we were actually in session. But we couldn't do anything with it because the state didn't recognize it until the November forecast. So it went up to $1.8 billion. In the November forecast, by statute, $600 million, or 30% or 1/3, I forget how the statute reads, went into the reserves. Okay? That left us with 1.2. Now, here's the concerning part. From November of last year to February of this year, that 1.2 projected surplus was downgraded to 900 million. Okay? Now we're seeing, for the first time in 2 years, we were on a steady climb of recovery. Revenues were always projected to come in a little higher. In 2 years, for the first time, now they've downgraded them. $300 million in 4 months. Okay? So that's our first red flag. And the reason this is happening is very simple. We didn't adjust the tax code at all last year. Okay? But when we took the majority in the last election, that was putting an end to 2 years of complete Democrat control. And remember that they put in some of the highest tax increases in state history. So what are we seeing right now? We're seeing the chickens come home to roost.
Yep.
All right? And what's happening? We've got people leaving the state of Minnesota because Governor Daudt raised the income tax 30%, or almost 30%, on the top income earners, right? So we're literally paying people to leave the state. Now, I always say, unfortunately, the governor, we don't have somebody at the border blocking these people out when they leave. And when that revenue leaves, we don't adjust our expenses down, right? The expenses stay the same. So what happens is you and I, who are still here, get left holding the bag. And the revenue that these, those highest income earners that now are living in Florida is gone. Okay? There's a couple of things I want to bring to your attention. And I actually said this to the governor. I was having breakfast with him one morning, and he made the comment that people aren't going to leave the state because we raised income taxes. Okay? Anybody believe that in here? He does. Believe it or not, he believes that. Okay? So I said, Governor, if nobody's leaving the state because of increasing the income taxes, why are you, through your commissioner of the Department of Revenue and in the Department of Revenue budget, spending millions of dollars on auditors and investigators to go and audit these people in Florida just to make sure that they're gone? That's how stupid it is. I mean, that's what we're doing. He says to the news media all the time, nobody's leaving, but he's literally spending millions of dollars on auditors just to make sure these people are gone. That's how stupid it is. It's very concerning what's going on, but I think we're seeing the chickens come home to roost on those tax increases. The other thing that was really concerning for me in that revenue forecast was the fact that they also kind of take a look at the economy in the state of Minnesota and nationally and try to project in the future what's going to happen. The job growth and wage growth in the state of Minnesota in the future is projected to be half of the national average. Okay? The average is just if we were, if we had 24, 25 states ahead of us and 24 or 25, we're half of that. Okay? We're in the bottom quartile of states for job growth and wage growth. That's what increasing taxes does to an economy. And I have been challenging people in St. Paul who, and I think my fellow legislators will appreciate this, all of the conversation down there is about how do we get more money into the state's budget? How do we get more revenue? How do we either raise taxes or how do we capture more revenue? All of our money, for the most part, I think almost all of it, comes from income tax, sales tax, corporate tax, capital gains tax. It's all from when Minnesotans are successful. So I've been challenging people at the Capitol, let's stop worrying about how to get money into our state budget. Let's start and let's spend 2 years, I'd like it to be in perpetuity, but I'll start with a 2-year request. Let's spend an entire biennium just focusing on how do we get more money into Minnesota family budgets. How can we create an environment or a growing economy where Minnesotans can thrive? And you know what? Revenue to the state will follow. And we'll actually have so much revenue we can start reducing taxes at a pretty high clip. But unfortunately, we're driving the cart around the barnyard by pushing it, trying to push it with the horse. And it's not going to work. So that sets us up for where we are right now. Sorry, I'm probably burning my minutes quickly here. So this session we come in with $900 million of surplus, okay? The governor put out his supplemental budget a few weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, okay? This probably won't shock you. But the governor is planning to spend all of the $900 million, and on top of that, raise another $900 million of new taxes each year. So we only have one year left of this biennium. It's $900 million of new taxes this year, and if you go to the next biennium and look at what it does, it's $1.8 billion of new taxes, okay? So what's the governor trying to do? Stimulate the economy by raising taxes. You can't make this stuff up. So our goal still with the $900 million, we just put our budget numbers out today. I hope you're happy with this. Our supplemental budget is a 0 increase. And we're reserving all of that $900 million. Now we'll still plan to transfer some of that into the Road and Bridge Fund and get it out of the general fund in perpetuity and improve our roads and bridges. But the vast majority of that money, we want permanent tax relief to help out Minnesotans. And we think that's the best thing we can do in this economy. We need to look at those revenue numbers from November to February and make sure that that's a wake-up call. That raising taxes hurts the economy and hurts the revenue of the state. So I brought this up. Larry gave me the kind of Ben gave me the priorities or your legislative agenda for this group, and I wanted to talk just briefly about a couple of those things, and you maybe want to talk about some of those as you ask questions. But Southwest Light Rail, part of the transportation standoff that's going on at the Capitol right now is Democrats want to fund Southwest Light Rail. We will not, this is another guarantee, as long as I'm Speaker of the House, we will not put a dime into Southwest Light Rail, period. Yeah! And I want to tell you a little story about how effective transit is, okay? We got numbers on North Star just recently. And regardless of whether you get on, this is the average that I'm going to give you now, so regardless of whether you get on in Big Lake or Fridley and ride into Minneapolis and back, okay? They just came out with the subsidy number on how much government subsidizes every trip, okay? $22 per trip. That's the average, okay? So every person that rides that train, the government is paying $22 for each trip, okay? Here's where it gets worse. If you ride into Minneapolis to work in the morning and out at night, that's 2 trips. $44 per day round trip, okay? In case you're not doing the math in your head right now, you multiply that out for a month, it's almost $1,000 a month per person, okay? We could buy a brand new Mercedes for every person that rides that train, pay for their gas, and have money left over. This is a great example of how efficient and effective state government can be at moving people, right? Unbelievable. And what do they want to do? They can't expand it fast enough. And what I'm really afraid of, so they tell us that Southwest Light Rail needs $136 million more of state money, okay? They were supposed to get $30 million in the budget last year. Absolutely not. We took that money and what did we do? We gave some of it to small cities for roads and bridges, but we basically prevented them from spending another $30 million in Southwest Light Rail last year. And we are not going to fund it this year. But what I'm afraid of is through setting up the Met Council, that they have set up a system where they will find a way to pay for this without legislative approval. And I think that's what they're trying to do right now. We have been so vocally against this project. And it's imperative that you all talk to everybody you know about why this is so important and make sure that we do everything we can to stop this project and stop the Met Council from doing this. The fact that we could spend $2 billion, and I know half of that is federal money, which doesn't matter. It's just money out of this pocket instead of this one, right? But the fact that we could spend $2 billion without the legislature taking a vote on it, to me, is shocking. But that's what the Democrats have set up over years and years of Democrat policies in St. Paul. no tax increases. We're on board. We're not increasing taxes, and that was part of the reason we had a standoff last year. Educational choice. This is something, over the summer you probably remember the governor numerous times, I think 4 times, called for a special session for one reason or another. The last reason he wanted a special session was to extend unemployment benefits on the Iron Range, which I will tell you actually was the right thing to do. Okay. First of all, it's not general fund money. It's money that employers and employees have paid into that fund. And I've been up to the range a couple of times since this has been going on. It's really tough up there. We did extend those benefits. It was the right thing to do. But what we also forced them to do was to take the surplus in that unemployment fund. We forced them to take $258 million of the surplus in that fund and give it back to employers and get it back into Minnesota's economy so that government wasn't sitting on that money. So that was a win. But when the governor called for that final special session, this was what was really funny about it. So the governor calls for a special session to extend unemployment benefits on the range. Senator Bach, who's from the range, says, oh, in addition to that, why don't we take care of this racial disparity issue down in Minneapolis? So you've got the Minneapolis governor calling for benefits on the range and vice versa, then Senator Bach chiming in on the racial disparity issue. And the problem is, on the racial disparity issue, minority, black Minnesotans are making, there's a big gap between what they and white folks in the same communities and the same types of jobs are making, okay? All right? So what does the governor propose doing, spending? It was $15 million. Now it's $100 million that they want to spend on this. For what? They can't even really define it. And there isn't anything we can do to solve the problem by throwing money at it, okay? But in the traditional fashion of Democrats, of course what they want to do is bundle up some more money and give it to some of their special interest groups, okay? Now, one of the problems that we've talked about in St. Paul fairly consistently for the last few years, and it's almost to the point where it's become the problem that we like to admire, is the fact that we have the highest achievement gap in the country. What does that mean? Minority students aren't getting the same education as white middle-income students, okay? A black student in the Minneapolis school district has less than 50% chance of graduating. No damn wonder they don't make as much money when they get out in the workforce. How can we solve this problem without dealing with this one? And what's the way to do it? School choice. Let's get those kids out of the failing public school system and get them into a school that's working. There's awesome charter schools in those districts that are churning out, not only 100% graduation rates, but frankly, 90+% college placement rates. With the same pool of students. So what we're learning is that Education Minnesota is trying to block all that stuff to keep those kids and lock those kids into a failing public school system. So we've got to solve that problem. And we won't let them waste money on throwing money at a problem until they're willing to address the real cause of the problem, is that we all together are failing these kids in a failed public school system. So we will talk till we're blue in the face, and we're going to force the Democrats to address the real problem, which is the achievement gap in the state of Minnesota. And then also, we will be passing out of the House this year, and I don't know the right term for it, but calling for I don't know if it's a constitutional convention to consider an amendment to the federal Constitution that basically would require a balanced budget for the federal government. We have that at the state level, and the fact that we don't at the federal government is a shame. So we are going to pass that out of the House this year. We need to pass it out of the Senate. So the way this process works, we don't have to have a signature from the governor. It just needs to pass the House and the Senate. So we are also working, and I hope Mary Kiffmeyer, her great colleagues in the GOP caucus in the Senate, will help us put pressure on the Democrats in the Senate to pass this bill. It shouldn't be a partisan issue, and I think we've got a real opportunity to do that. So we're going to do that out of the House for sure, and that's another thing where we could use your help. Make sure that you talk to folks. Once we do that, it'll start to get some attention from the media, and hopefully it'll build up some pressure on the Senate to do that. So with that, again, thanks for having me in, but fire some questions at me. What do you want to talk to me about right here, folks?
Okay. I happen to have two friends who are financial. I can stand. I have a big voice. I can talk.
Yeah, we hear you.
Is this loud enough? I have two friends who are financial advisors to people who we would call in the top 1/10 of 1%.
Yep.
Here's what he advises them. Sell your property. You can't just keep your cabin and move to Florida or Arizona. Sell everything. Move your bank accounts. Move your brokerage accounts. Have no connection to Minnesota. What that does is it means they don't spend money up at their cabin. They don't spend money here in the metro. They don't leave any money in the banks. They don't leave any money in the brokerage accounts. It is such a, and the governor can't see that, even looking at the IRS records. I don't know what to say. He just doesn't see. But maybe you could ask him what non-essential travel is, like a computer solving for pi.
You're absolutely right on, and unfortunately, I kind of look at what Barack Obama has done in his presidency, and I hope people are paying attention. He has negotiated deals, and I negotiate on our behalf. So I sit with the governor and Senator Bach, and I know that it takes some negotiation at the end to come out with a final budget. But you can, so I understand kind of what they're talking about when they're negotiating. Obama has negotiated deals so bad that you literally have to have, you have to be trying to lose to negotiate the deals that he has. One of the things that has come up when we talked about extending unemployment benefits at the range, what has happened up there is they have idled the mines, and the steel mills on the Great Lakes are idled because China is dumping steel at a really low cost onto U.S. soil. And it's basically what's happening is China has an excess capacity in its steel production larger than our entire domestic capacity here. Okay? So they are doing to the U.S. right now exactly what OPEC is doing to the U.S. in gas prices, right? So we start producing oil and drilling for oil in North Dakota, and all the jobs and economic benefit that we got out of that, but OPEC doesn't like that, so they start dropping the price of oil down below where it makes any sense to produce it here. Now they shut all that down in North Dakota, and then they start to slowly raise the price to a point where it just kind of, it's profitable for them, but it doesn't get us starting on our oil wells again. Okay? Well, what we need to do is we need the president to block this foreign steel from coming in. Okay? It's been done twice in the past. Reagan did it, and then Bush Jr. did it. That's the last two times it's been done. Well, we had the White House Chief of Staff here, and we said, this is what you've got to do. It's not in this country's best interest strategically to not have domestic steel production. Okay, and it's not as easy to flip the switch on an iron mine on the Iron Range as it is to start a pump in North Dakota. Okay, so it's much more difficult. Once they run these mines out of business, it's going to be very difficult to start them back up. So it's not in our best interest. Now we think what happened is, sorry, I'm way off in the weeds.
That's all right. I was just going to ask.
Yeah.
Is all the steel that would introduce and all this within the special suppliers?
Good question. I'll follow. Maybe.
That's a great question for me to ask on the Senate floor.
So we think what happened, because Obama won't do this, remember a year and a half ago now, he made a deal with the Chinese. And we think that he got them to come to the table on his climate talks, and that was the deal, that he would not shut down or stop their foreign imports of steel in order to get them to come to the table on the climate talks. Okay. Now, when I say the only way you can negotiate a deal this bad is if that's actually what you're trying to do, is because the deal he made a year and a half ago with the Chinese was, we have to immediately start reducing our carbon emissions. Right now, we have to start reducing our carbon emissions. And China can peak 15 years from now. Okay? So this is the green president, right? He cares about the environment. How many of you have been to China?
Yeah.
The sky in China is about the color of his sport coat, and you have to wear a mask there now because you can't breathe the air. But they don't need to start reducing their emissions now. They have 15 years, okay? So what's Obama up to? This isn't about the environment at all. They're using that as a mask. What he's doing is he's equalizing economies. He's trying to bring us down from being the world superpower, and some of the ways that you do that is by getting rid of our steel production and making sure we're not producing oil here.
And copper.
Right. I mean, all of it. All of
The
it.
largest contributor to the Democratic Party is
All of it.
Soros. The largest owner of copper mines in the world is George Soros.
Yep.
Why do you think we don't have a copper mine in Ireland?
Let me ask you a quick question.
Go ahead.
You know, before you go there, I was thinking of this and give you a rest there, but Kurt, remember when we had the majority right now. For 2 years, we had all Democrats. They taxed and spent like crazy. But the 2 years before that, we had the majority in the House and the Senate. And we had a $6.2 billion budget shortfall, projected budget shortfall. And the House and the Senate, and they negotiated really hard with the governor and managed to cut $5 billion. Now, in government language, cutting $5 billion is no simple task. But we have the House and the Senate, so we have 2 of the 3, and we could do that. But the most important thing is, you see the effect of the tax increases and what it's doing to the economy, and the flight of income generators out of the state. But after that time, we increased the budget revenues by over $3 billion. The power of exactly what you said, of increasing government revenue, is by leaving money in your pocket, not taking it from you. Because when it's in your pocket and you spend it and it bounces around and you create jobs and you build things and you do stuff, all of that process along the way does increase government revenue, but in the right way. And of course, what you do with the extra revenue is, when we have choices, is to cut taxes. They didn't, because then they got to land on top of that big surplus, and they not only spent it, but they raised taxes on top of it. But it is powerful when you get that kind of control. If we do not get the House, keeping the House and adding the Senate, the flight is going to be even heavier. I hear from people all the time, they're going to give us one more election. And you think right now there's a flight? It's going to double and triple. People are getting ready to leave, but they're thinking this election, we're going to give it one more time, because you got a baby boomer wave that's coming here, and they're not foolish. Government says, oh, they'll pay to play. So they're going to stay in Minnesota, they're going to put up with all this. And I say, no way. They'll pay to play to fly the grandkids down to Florida. Okay, because they're not foolish in regards to their fixed income, their life savings, and what they're all doing. It's a foolish gamble that the governor's taking, and we are just on the peak of that, both presidential and in our state.
Just yesterday, John Hinderaker of the Center for American Experiment, his team put out this flight based on taxes, and we always think it's going to be all these retired people. Only 28% of the people that have left are over 65. So it's not just old people that have decided they'd like better weather. And somebody asked a question, I think this was very much on point. We talk about it in terms of dollars, but it's people who save lives, it's people who invent things, it's people who start businesses, it's those people who contribute to the greatness of Minnesota that are the people that are leaving. Just a quick follow-up question on your earlier thing about the rail. You say $44 a day subsidy. Is that the ongoing operating subsidy, or does that relate to capital as well?
That is, unfortunately, the bad news is that is only the ongoing operating cost. That does not take into account any of the capital upfront costs to build the project. That's only the ongoing cost. I mean, think about that. $44 every day for somebody that rides that train round trip. On top of the money they pay for the ticket. So they're buying a ticket for each direction, probably maybe you're
They don't even check. They don't even check.
We had a member, just on a side story, we had a member that rode from St. Paul to the Twins game, and the train was full because it was headed to the Twins game. And 2 stops before the stadium, people started bailing out, and he couldn't figure out, well, I've never done this before. Am I getting off the wrong stop? Why are all these people, they're all wearing Twins hats, and, why are they getting off? Next stop, a bunch more get out. There's about a third of the people left in the train by the time it gets to the final stop. Doors open, he gets out, somebody's checking tickets at the final stop, right? People know that. That's the problem. That's the problem. Go ahead, sir.
Wow.
Talking about the Met Council, why haven't you or can you defund them?
Well, defunding the Met Council, they're appointed by the governor. So they're an unelected taxing authority, deeply embedded in statute, way beyond what they were intended for. Can you do that? You would never get that bill signed by the governor.
Yeah, that's one of the problems right now with having only, Republicans have the House, Democrats have the Senate, and the Democrat governor. So we can't get them to sign that bill. We've tried to force them, and we're going to continue to try to force them this year. But every time you've got to, try to pass something like that, you have to give them something in order for them to take that. So you've got to weigh, is it worth it for us to give this up in order to get this? And so far we haven't been able to make a deal that's beneficial enough to do that. But remember that just what Mary said is right. I could be wrong with this information, but I think there's 14 cities that have a setup like the Met Council. And we are the only one where they are appointed and not elected. And they have taxing authority, so they are levying taxes themselves and collecting that from the Met Council service area, they call it. So we do provide some of their funding, but majority of it comes from their own ability to levy taxes. So. Great.
Yeah, I'm in healthcare, and I'm wondering what's being done with MNsure and other issues with schools. And, they have these schools that are sitting empty, but yet they want to build new ones.
Yeah. On the MNsure question, this is an unmitigated disaster. We warned them when they did it. And I remember the speeches on the House floor. This is going to, lower costs, that's what they said, and it's going to increase access. It's going to increase choice. Here we are, I don't know how many years later, three years later, and it's been absolutely the opposite. And it is so bad, and they are so in denial. I remember a couple of years ago when they were coming out with their rates, okay? None of this is by coincidence, by the way. But it was, they were supposed to come out with their rates in October. They did that. You know when the election happens, right? First week in November. Not a coincidence. They came out with the rates in October. They said the average rate increase is going to be 4%. This is literally the commissioner of Commerce. Okay? Commerce is a department that exists for the sole purpose of protecting consumers. Okay? Commissioner of Commerce comes out and says, good news, rates are only going up an average of 4% on MNsure. That was in October. Election happens in November. Later in November, we find out what the real rate increase is. 41%. They only missed it by 90%, okay? And they knew better. They literally lied to Minnesotans, okay? The commissioner of a department that exists for the sole purpose of protecting consumers literally lied to Minnesotans through his teeth, knew he was doing it for the sole purpose of getting through that next election. Absolutely shameful. On top of that 41% increase last year, average 44% increase, okay? These are compounding on top of each other, okay? There's barely any choice in MNsure left. The biggest provider left, I think a couple of them have left now. So the choice, there isn't any. And the cost is multiples. Okay, one of the reasons they wanted to do MNsure was what we call uncompensated care at hospitals. So that's people showing up in the emergency room who can't afford to pay the bill. Okay, prior to MNsure, we had a 93 or 94% insured rate in the state, highest in the country. Insured, 93 or 94%. 6 to 7% uninsured. And half of those were eligible for insurance but chose not to pay for it. Okay? You know what the biggest problem is right now? Hospitals are saying their uncompensated care is actually higher now than it was before. Little different reason. You know what the reason is now? People with MNsure are coming in to get service and they can't afford the deductible. They have $5,000 and $6,000 deductibles. They can't afford their deductible. So they're leaving the hospital hanging with an unpaid bill.
And
So-
not only that, what they're planning to do, because they're not bringing enough revenue and all of that, they are now proposing a 3.5% tax that is currently only on those plans inside that, to apply that and increase your premiums automatically 3.5% for everybody else to pay for them. It's just a gift that keeps on giving, and it gets worse and worse because they are incompetent managers. Their 1095s that they were required to put out. I have a constituent in my area still doesn't have it, and the taxes have to be filed by April 15th.
So to answer the question, what we need to do is kill MNsure, end it, send all those people, send all those people temporarily into the federal exchange, like half of the other states that had state exchanges have already, more than half have already done. Send them into the federal exchange. And the reason to do that is we have spent more than $300 million on MNsure. None of it has gone to actually provide health insurance for anyone. It's all for bureaucracy in St. Paul. It's for computer contracts and employees and bonuses for employees. We need to eliminate that bureaucratic layer, send them into the federal exchange where they'll actually probably get better rates. And then in November, we need to win the presidency and kill Obamacare once and for all. And that's the real answer to how to solve the problem. He's got the microphone, so he'll just raise your hand and he'll come get you.
Just a short time ago, you mentioned that the Met Council is levying taxes on us. In my shirt pocket, I have a copy of the Constitution that says something about the House of Representatives is where all the funding has to begin. If this is unconstitutional, why is it allowed to happen?
Well, they use the same type of authority that a city or a school district would use. You know that a city council's budget, they can levy taxes. Now, I'm not defending them. I agree with you, and I want to eliminate them completely. But that's, that particular part of the Constitution doesn't apply to them. That talks about the state government, and a bill for state government spending for increasing taxes has to originate in the House. Unfortunately, they're using another authority to do that, and we want to eliminate them completely. And one of the things that we need to do is start playing the long game. Democrats, we didn't get to where we are today overnight, okay? This is through 40 or 50 years of the drip, drip, drip of water torture of Democrat policies, okay? And Democrats have learned to make incremental change over time. And one of the problems I think that we make is, and I had to deal with expectations when we took the House, because everybody said, great, now we can stop everything and we can, and the problem is, everybody wants everything they want, and they want it all right now. And what we need to do is play the long game, because to make real wholesale change to state government, we need 2 years with all three. We need the House, the Senate, and the governor's office. So we won the House. I think we've done a pretty good job against these guys. I mean, to the point where at the end of last session, I remember when we went into special session, the headline on Minnesota Public Radio, the morning of special session was, and you know how conservative NPR is, right? The headline on NPR that morning was, outmaneuvered, how Dayton lost all of his priorities, okay? And when special session was over, 24 hours later, let's see, we went at 10 o'clock on Friday morning. No, I guess less than that. We were in until about 3 a.m. Saturday morning. The Senate caucus, Democrat caucus, went into caucus at 3 o'clock in the morning for 3 hours, and the members of the Senate DFL caucus tried to vote Senator Bach out because he gave up too much to us. That's how successful we were last session. Granted, I know, we didn't get everything we wanted. Believe me, I wanted more too. But we were able to outmaneuver them in the negotiations, and I think we did a
great job. But we worked together, the Senate,
absolutely.
Republicans worked together, communicating and elsewhere. That final bill, it was a riot. Just to see it, on that final bill, it was the Republicans who passed it. That is unheard of. When you have a Senate majority Democrat, and it is the Republican senators that got that special session ended, voted for it, and got it done. It was really kind of fun to have it, and I would love to do more.
We actually passed, there were the Senate Republicans They passed 2 bills out of the Senate. 2 of the 3 passed out of the Senate with a majority of Republican votes. Tom Bach could only get 11 members of his own caucus to vote for 2 of the budget bills. That's why they tried to throw him out. But those bills were so good for us, he couldn't get his caucus to vote for them.
And right now they are in such disarray in the Senate. They are fighting with each other. Senator Dibble wants to be the majority leader. Can you imagine Scott Dibble, the majority leader? That is what will happen if the Republicans do not win the Senate this year. You will get Scott Dibble. And he's a little more wily as far as Bach is a little more favored in a conservative type approach, if you can call it that. He works a little bit at it. But Scott Dibble, no hold barred. He will reign, he will rule, and do everything.
But the real answer is we need to win all 3. So this year is a really interesting election cycle, and I want to talk about this really quick. Mary mentioned it earlier about how important this election cycle is. It's an interesting election cycle in that there's no statewide races this year, okay? So it's the presidential race in Minnesota, and then we'll have congressional races, of course, but there's no U.S. Senate or gubernatorial race, and then it's just the House and the Senate, and we're both up, okay? What that means is Democrats usually can outspend us in our elections, sometimes as much as 2 to 1. Why? They get about 2/3 of their money from labor unions, okay? Like $4 million from the teachers union alone last cycle. So what happens is they want this majority that we have in the House so bad they can taste it, okay? And the reason this is the most important thing in this election cycle is that if they get the majority back, it'll make the 2 years that they had the complete majority look like kindergarten. Why? Because that was actually, as bad as that was actually Democrats holding back. They were trying to look reasonable, okay? They realize now that was a mistake. They should have put the pedal to the metal and changed this state forever. And they will do that if they get it back. So they are going to focus all their resources on making sure the Senate doesn't win and that we lose our House majority. So this is Custer's last stand. You won't recognize this state in 2 years if we lose. So this is vitally important. But we've got a real opportunity. We kind of are the foundation across the state. We need to build on that now and win the Senate, and we've got an opportunity to do that. And I'll shut up. Go ahead. Larry's got a question in the back here. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is just kind of on the tax issue overall. And I hear a lot of, no new taxes stuff, but our tax rates are pretty bad as they are. And I want to know how do we articulate how we're going to lower taxes, what taxes we should lower. It's easy to vote against a gas tax increase, but how do we get Minnesotans to see and understand that cutting this tax or that tax is good for them? It's in dollars in their pocket that they control. I feel like we miss the messaging a little bit when we say no new taxes all the time. And I think we should, in the House, I'm not telling you how to do your job, but in the House, I'd like to flood them with some tax bills. Get all of them on the record. Get every Democrat in a competitive seat on the record voting against this tax cut and that tax cut and all that, and give our candidates a real good, solid issue to run on. And I'd just like to see more articulating on what taxes could be lowered, why, and not just say no new taxes all the time. And I guess that's not a question, it's more of a comment. But
right.
Just kind of curious where the House stands on
Yeah, we don't, our messaging isn't no new taxes. We're obviously not, and we tell people they're dead, we're not voting for gas taxes. We don't say it that way because one of the things that I figured out when I took over as leader of the caucus a little over 3 years ago, and I took over right after the 2012 election, when I think it was kind of the lowest point in Minnesota for Republicans, and I thought, gosh, here I am. I've only been here 2 years. Now I got to figure out how to rebuild this thing. And one of the things that I did is kind of analyze what are people's perceptions of Republicans and what are people's perceptions of Democrats. And I looked around, and it seemed like Democrats had created this perception that Republicans were extreme and somehow Democrats were reasonable. Well, we knew that was exactly the opposite. We know the Democrats that we serve with in St. Paul, they're the most radical bunch of progressives that you've ever seen in your life. There's nothing mainstream about this group, okay? And we knew that our policies and the way that we think was much closer in line with the way Minnesotans think. So we really try to stake out areas where we can connect with Minnesotans. I think one of the mistakes that we've made is when we go out and we talk to people, and I'm going to say it this way, even though it can be used in non-campaign situations as well, but we campaign with our brain, and then we govern with our brain, right? Well, Democrats campaign with their heart. They talk to people's heart, and they connect with people. And they make it personal. They tell stories about why this is going to be good for you, or why you should hate Republicans, because this is what they're trying to do to you. They scare you with your, But the problem is Democrats also govern with their heart. They're just plain stupid. I mean, they do things that are just horribly bad policy. So they're great at politics, but they're horrible at policy. The right thing to do, and we're wrong when we campaign with our brain because we're not connecting with people. So the right way to do it would be campaign with your heart. Talk to people. And so we've started to do that. And then when you get there, govern with your brain. So we've started doing that and staking out positions where we can win the issues. And we do things like, how many people in this room are pro-life? Okay? So we can go and we can pass every bit of pro-life legislation. It's going to die because every Senate Republican will vote for it, but the Senate Democrats won't pass it. And the governor, who has a lieutenant governor who is a former vice president of Planned Parenthood, this is the most pro-choice or pro-abortion governor we probably ever had. But the problem is we sometimes in the suburbs, they've got the media on their side and we lose on the messaging. So what we've tried to do is be creative, right? One of the things that we want to do is talk about licensing of abortion clinics, okay? You know that a tattoo parlor is licensed in the state of Minnesota. But you can go in an abortion clinic and they are not required to be licensed. Almost every facility in the state of Minnesota is licensed, not an abortion clinic, okay? Not a coincidence either, by the way. But think about this. I mean, we can talk about stopping taxpayer funding of abortions or whatever, defunding Planned Parenthood, but think about this. When we talk about licensing an abortion clinic, all of a sudden we are talking about protecting women. And for them to say, no, I don't want you to license an abortion clinic, we are forcing them to take the position of saying, no, we're not going to protect women. We've got to outsmart them in the way we think and talk. And we've got to stake out issues where we can win. And we have to understand that there's a difference between perception and reality. And we have to live in that world of perception. And we need to play the long game. And when we can get all three, we will not miss the opportunity to change the fiber of this state. I guarantee you that.
Mr. Speaker, we have time for one more question. And Scott Schulte.
Thank you, Larry. Scott Schulte, Anoka County Commissioner. Mr. Speaker, Senator, Reps, thanks for being here. I know it's schedule you guys keep is pretty ridiculous, actually. And the fact that you could come out here and hang with the people that elected is really, really important. I want to clarify one point. The Speaker mentioned that there are 14 like Met Council entities. That's just in the state of Minnesota. There are 454 of them in the United States. There's only one with appointed people. All the rest are elected. And that's our Met Council. There's a major reform going on right now. A four-county consortium got together and have been working with cities. We work with a lot of the Anoka County cities, some of the Hennepin County cities, and then, of course, Dakota, Carver, and Scott County as well. We're getting resolutions signed saying that Met Council reform is priority. Not just staggered terms, but elected officials serving on those bodies. It's one of our last chances to do it. So if you have a chance to reach out to your city council members, your mayors, do that, talk to them. We'll be talking to them. We need those resolutions. We're going down to the legislature. Representative Albright has a good bill going through that has Met Council reform. I'm going to be leaning on the Speaker and other people to find a way. The Speaker already mentioned it's going to be used as a lever. You're not going to get Met Council reform without giving up something. Right now, the Chamber says, well, give them a gas tax. Let them do a gas tax in exchange for Met Council reform. We're not on that page. We don't want that. We think there's something. There's something out there the Democrats want that we're going to be able to give them, and we don't have to fall on our sword over. That's up to Kurt to find out. He did it last year. He'll do it this year. He's going to figure it out. I can't thank you enough for being here, and I can't thank you enough for the leadership you provide us. I do have one quick question, though. Do you have any idea what that lever is?
I don't exactly know. we know there are some things that they want. And I'll also say, we didn't talk a lot about this, but the big divide in St. Paul isn't between Republicans and Democrats. And believe me, there's a big divide there. The really big divide in St. Paul is between Minneapolis St. Paul Democrats, and they fit in what I call the environmentalist clique within the Democratic Party. So the Minneapolis St. Paul Democrats versus the outstate Democrats. And you saw that bubble up to the surface last session. It happened in February of last year. If you remember, Senator Bach and Governor Dayton got in a huge public fight. And that public fight, I mean, to the point where Governor Dayton that afternoon went and did a press conference and said to the press, I don't trust Tom Bach. I mean, these two guys are the same party, Senate leader and the governor. I don't trust Tom Bach. Stab me in the back. The one I love. I won't be in the same room alone with him for the rest of session. I don't trust him. You can't make this stuff up, right? So of course, I'm pretty good at the political side of things. So the first thing you do when your opposition is tripping all over themselves, do not get in their way and do not help them up. So we just shut our mouths and step back for a week and let them fight. And let that play out in the press. But what that did is that set up a great opportunity for us to step up and show some leadership. And I said to Senator Bach early on in session Senator Hand early on in session last year, we will be successful if we can drive a wedge, and you and I take turns with sledgehammers driving a wedge between Senator Bach and Governor Dayton. And we have gotten there to the point where after we learned that the Senate Democrats had gone into caucus and tried to vote out Tom Bach, the reason that happened is the night before, Tom Bach invited the governor to come to their caucus meeting, and the plan was that the governor was supposed to ask his caucus to vote for these budget bills that they ultimately refused to vote for. When he got there, he spent 10 or 15 minutes lambasting Tom Bach in front of his caucus, and the governor asked Tom's caucus to vote him out. He literally asked his caucus to remove him as the leader of the caucus. That's how bad their fight was. They are not getting along any better today, and that puts us in a great position. We've got a lot of work to do in St. Paul this year, and it's my honor to serve as the Speaker of the House and to represent you there. We need you to help us. We need more Republican senators in St. Paul so that we can be successful. You've got a really great group of conservatives, and we are fighting tooth and nail for all of the things that you believe in. And I want to thank you very much for coming out tonight, for giving me a few minutes. You can probably tell I get a little passionate about this stuff, and I'm really happy to do it because I am so passionate, because it is so important. I thank you for coming out and getting involved like this, and make sure that everybody you talk to until November understands how important this election is and how important it is that we hold the House and we win the Senate. So I want to thank you for coming out, and thank you in advance for your help through this next election cycle, and keep getting involved and staying involved and get as many people involved as you can. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much. This is really important. We're often kind of the soldiers, and sometimes in the communication, we get left out of the communication. So we don't know exactly what's going on, and maybe we're not going to carry that message all the way to the door every time, but we need to understand. So we really appreciate taking the time to come out and help us understand where you're coming from, where you're trying to go, because that's really important. We need to feel that confidence when we go up the door that, yes, that is what they're working on. Yes, I understand why they're working on. And so this is very, very helpful. So very much appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
We got two things left, real quick. And while Representative Whalen is walking up to give it, she'd like a minute of personal privilege. We also have to wish Mary Amlaw. Where is Mary? She left? Oh, too bad. We're going to wish her a belated happy birthday, but we missed the opportunity. Oh well, I didn't see that she stepped out. Wait a minute.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much much for having me here. And I won't take up too much time. The speaker did a great job kind of summarizing the issues going on in St. Paul. I will just give you a quick update on a bill I'm working on related to the University of Minnesota and their aborted fetal tissue research studies. Brief background, if you don't know, back this summer when we started finding out about aborted fetal tissue research, we asked the university, some staff and lawmakers, do you do this? We didn't know. The immediate response was, no, we don't. Now come to find after an undercover investigation they do, and through a series of events, working on legislation now to prohibit the university from doing this. And my bill has been heard twice now. I was heard in HHS Finance and now on the Higher Education Committee. And it's been very frustrating and being in conversations with university leaders, because just the most recent thing that happened, they sent out an email to all of their alumni. I don't know if they forgot I was an alumni and that I get these emails, but it was fraught with misrepresentations of my bill and, among other things, just kind of gave me just one more reason to continue on and pressing forward with this bill. So if you have more questions on that, I'd be happy to chat with you. I'm hopeful we can see something positive come from this and to start rebuilding trust with the university. I say over and over in committee, I am an alumni. I want to see the university succeed and do well, and I'm hopeful we can come together and find a way to move forward and rebuild trust with the people of Minnesota, which is what I would love to see. So that's kind of one of the big things I'm working on, and as I said, the speaker really did a great job summarizing the other things, and Senator Kiffmeyer as well. With that, I'll hand it back to Ben.
Now everybody wants to talk.
Thanks. I'll be brief. The evening's moving on. I just want to say that this election is one of the most important elections that I think we've faced, both nationally and at a statewide level, in many, many, many years. And my first session over at the legislature, I was in the minority when Kurt became minority leader. And I can tell you, it is not any fun sitting over there watching the Democrats with their liberal agenda just destroying our conservative values. Now we are in the majority in the House, and there's some things that we can do. And we can drive the agenda in the House, but we still run into the democratically controlled Senate and our poor excuse for a governor. And until our party gets together behind our candidates and is united, we're going to have a difficult time. We all can be very, idealistic about the things that we want to do with the Met Council and some of these other things and taxes. But until we get absolute majorities, we are going to be fighting this game with one or even almost two hands tied behind our back. So all I can say is get out, help your local candidates, give them some money, and be vocal with your neighbors and everybody else about how important this election is for our conservative values, because I think each and every one of us in this room is uneasy. We're unhappy with the way this country is moving. Every single day, you open up the paper, you listen to the radio, you watch TV, things are not good. We're going in the wrong direction. And the only way we can change that is to elect our local and national candidates to office and win. We have to win this fall. So we will try to do the very best we can. We have great leadership. We have great young people like Representative Whalen. We've got great county commissioners here. But we need to expand that. We need to get a bigger team over in St. Paul and Washington. Thank you.
That's it for tonight. Thank you very much for coming. I think it was a good meeting, and thank you for your questions and your participation. And hope you paid all your bills and left a nice tip. Especially that you paid all your bills. A nice tip would be great. So.